Colleagues. Good evening and a warm welcome to each one of you to Embassy of India, Tokyo. Today's event is aimed at showcasing the Voice of Global South Summit that was convened by India in January 2023 to bring together voices from over 120 nations in the Global South in order to deliberate on issues that are vital to the future of the world. Before we begin the proceedings, I would like to make two small requests. First, please switch off your mobile phone or place it in silent mode. Second, photography during the course of the event is permitted, but please refrain from using flash. Without further ado, please join me in inviting onto the stage His Excellency Sibi George, Ambassador of India in Japan, to deliver the opening remarks.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to one and all. On behalf of the Embassy of India in Tokyo, I extend a very warm welcome to each one of you. I thank Excellencies who have joined us today. Today we have invited you to a unique briefing session captioned Glimpses of Voice of Global South. I thank the political wing of the mission for the initiative in organizing this unique event. It is to present to you the highlights of a major event, a special summit that India hosted on 12th and 13th January 2023 with the participation of over 120 countries. The summit was captioned Voice of Global South Summit under the theme Unity of Voice, Unity of Purpose. The summit was aimed at bringing together countries of the Global South and share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform across a whole range of issues. This initiative was inspired by Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi's vision of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, or Sabka Prayas, meaning together for everyone's growth, with everyone's trust and everyone's efforts, and is also underpinned by India's philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, world is one family. Dear friends, excellencies, the voice of Global South was India's endeavor to provide a common platform to deliberate on some of the major concerns, interests, and priorities that affect the developing countries, also to exchange ideas and solutions, and most importantly, to unite in voice and purpose in addressing these elements of our concerns and priorities. India's endeavor was to ensure that the valuable inputs generated from partner countries in the Voice of Global South Summit deliberations receive due cognizance globally. India's ongoing presidency of G20 provides us a special opportunity to channelize these inputs into a deliberation and discourse of the G20. While assuming our presidency, Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi had said that India's G20 priorities would be shaped in consultation with not just G20 partners, but also with our fellow travelers in Global South, whose voice often goes unheard. This summit was an opportunity for those countries that are not part of the G20 process to share their ideas and expectations through this mechanism with the G20. You would recall that the theme of India's current G20 presidency is One Earth, One Family, One Future. The inaugural session addressed by Honorable Prime Minister revolved around Voice of Global South for Human-Centric Development. He said, and I quote, "Together, the Global South can produce new and creative ideas. These ideas can form the basis of our voice in G20 and other forums," unquote. He spoke about a global agenda of respond, recognize, respect, and reform. Respond to the priorities of the Global South by framing an inclusive and balanced international agenda. Recognize that the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities applies to all global challenges. Third, respect sovereignty of all nations, rule of law, and peaceful resolution of differences and disputes. And 4, reform international institutions, including the United Nations, to make them more relevant. There were 10 sessions at the summit. The finance minister session was on the theme financing people-centric development. The environment minister session focused on the theme on balancing growth with environment-friendly lifestyles. It also covered the initiative Life Mission that the Prime Minister launched on lifestyle for sustainable development. I'm happy to mention that in coming weeks, Embassy will organize a special event on Life Mission. I look forward to your participation. The Foreign Ministers session on the first day was on the theme of priorities of the Global South, ensuring a conducive environment. The Energy Ministers session focused on the theme Energy Security and Development, Roadmap to Prosperity. The Health Ministers session focused on the theme Cooperation to Rebuild Resilient Healthcare Systems, given the background of COVID-19 pandemic. And the Education Ministers session focused on the theme of human-centric development and capacity building among the countries of the Global South. The Commerce and Trade Ministers session focused on the theme developing synergies in the Global South, trade, technology, tourism, and resources. Given the ongoing Indian presidency of G20, the Foreign Ministers session on day 2 focused on the theme G20, captioned G20 suggestions for India's presidency. I think I will stop here. We have a detailed presentation on the highlights of the summit coming up in the next session. I once again thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks providing an overview of the summit. Before we head on to the presentation detailing the deliberations of the summit, we have prepared 2 videos as a precursor. Excellencies, as you are aware, India has assumed the presidency of G20 on 1st December 2022. We are glad to inform you that the meetings, ranging across several domains, are steadily progressing in all corners of the country. The logo and theme of G20 represent the vision of India for its presidency. We would like to present before you a short video outlining this vision.
India, home of 1.3 billion people, is a confluence of religions, traditions, and customs. A thriving global center of technology and the world's largest democracy. As one of the oldest civilizations in the world with a rich cultural heritage and diversity, and as the 5th largest economy in the world, India is proud to assume the presidency of G20. As the country blooms into a new era, we look to another poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from its challenges. Lotus, the national flower of India, representing our culture, history, and heritage. A poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from its challenges. And the inspiration for India's G20 logo design. The design, rendered in saffron, white, green, and blue, is drawn from the national flag of India. The 7 petals in the logo signify the 7 seas and the coming together of 7 continents at G20 India 2023. Sitting above the lotus is a representation of the earth, reflecting India's pro-planet approach to life and seeing the world as one family. From this, we derive the theme for G20 India 2023, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. a theme that brings the G20's focus on shared global growth, while being in harmony with nature. G20 India 2023. One Earth, one family, one future.
वसुधैव कुटुम्बकम्।
Our next video is titled Glimpses of the Voice of Global South Summit. It is a brief video covering the 10 sessions held over the 2 days of the summit. Please enjoy it. Thank you for patiently watching the videos. Next, we head on to the presentation on the Voice of Global South Summit to be delivered by Political Officer Ms. Madhuri Gaddam.
Honorable Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends of India, thank you for joining us today for this event on Voice of Global South Summit. My presentation today is intended at summarizing the deliberations held during the summit. Honorable Ambassador Sir had already provided an overview of the summit in his opening remarks, but to quickly recap, India hosted a 2-day Voice of Global South Summit between 12th to 13th January 2023. The meeting altogether brought leaders and ministers from 125 countries of the global south on one platform, a significant achievement indeed. India convened this one of a kind summit to focus international attention on priorities, perspectives, and concerns of the developing world. This is particularly relevant as the world passes through a difficult period marked by challenges to health, food security, affordable access to energy, climate finance and technologies, and economic growth. This summit is a timely reminder of what is at stake for over three-fourths of the planet's population that is most vulnerable to the impact of several interlinked risks that we confront. Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi presided over the inaugural leaders session on 12th January. This was followed by 8 ministerial level thematic segments dedicated to addressing the most pressing concerns of the developing world. The summit wrapped up on 13 January with a concluding leaders session also hosted by Prime Minister. You can see the timeline of the day one on the screen, which included 4 sessions, one inaugural session followed by 3 ministerial sessions. During the course of my presentation, I will provide a brief overview of the theme and points of focus of each session. The inaugural leaders session, led by Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, was attended by heads of government from 10 countries, which are displayed on the screen. For each session henceforth, similar images will appear on the screen. Coming to the inaugural session, in his inaugural remarks, Prime Minister framed the key issues at stake for the developing world. He highlighted the opportunity for uplifting economies and societies of the global south through a shared vision and agenda for change. In this endeavor, he offered to share India's experiences through simple, scalable, and sustainable solutions. He highlighted India's achievements in vaccine development, biometric-based identification, digital public goods, financial inclusion, and last-mile connectivity. He also spoke about the need for developing world to have access to technology, knowledge, and critical resources. His call for a new human-centric development paradigm received widespread support from participating leaders. The first ministerial session was the finance ministers' session. The session was attended by the finance ministers of 15 countries of global south and led by Honorable Finance Minister of India, Shri Nirmala Sitharaman. In this session themed Financing People-Centric Development, ministers exchanged views on financing the developing needs of the global south, achieving financial inclusion, implementation of digital public goods in the financial sector, and development partnerships that are outcome-oriented and financially sustainable. Next was the Environment Ministers session. The session brought together environment ministers from 14 countries, including several powerful voices from the small island developing states. The Environment Ministers session focused attention on balancing growth with sustainability, sharing best practices in ecological conservation, and importance of LIFE mission, which was launched by Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi in October 2022. Mission LIFE aims to be an India-led global mass movement that will nudge individual and collective action to protect and preserve the environment. The participating ministers also called for accelerated climate action and delivery of climate finance. They also emphasized on loss and damage funding to deal with growing climate impacts, with focus on equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, that is CBDRRC. The last session on day one was the Foreign Ministers session led by Honorable External Affairs Minister of India, Shri S. Jaishankar. He was joined by his counterparts from 12 developing nations. In this very important session, focusing on the priorities of Global South, ministers expressed concern over the increasing fragmentation of the international landscape. They exchanged perspectives on how to create a conducive environment for all the developing nations of the Global South. Ministers urged the international community to address the triple challenge of food, fuel, and fertilizer shortages. They also called for renewed and inclusive multilateralism that reflects contemporary realities. The need to raise a collective voice against the scourge of terrorism was underlined. We now move to day two, that comprised of 5 ministerial segments and ended with the concluding leaders session. The day began with Energy Ministers' session led by Honorable Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Shri Hardeep Puri. The session also saw participation of energy ministers from 12 countries of Global South. The session emphasized the criticality of energy security for global growth and human development, access to energy amidst the increasing instability, and ensuring energy affordability through diversification of energy resources, and sharing best practices to develop renewables and alternative energy were focuses of the session. Honorable Minister outlined India's success story of increasing its renewable energy capacity by 300% in the last 8 years and urged the countries of Global South to join India-led initiatives such as the International Solar Alliance. The second session on day 2 brought together commerce and trade ministers from 13 countries. The session themed Developing Synergies in the South was led by Honorable Commerce and Industry Minister of India, Shri Piyush Goyal. In the Commerce Trade Minister session, ministers shared strategies on improving the business and investment climate in developing countries, upgrading connectivity and commerce, and ensuring access to critical technologies and resources. The participating ministers urged for fostering grassroots innovation and diversification of supply chains. Ministers agreed that a sustainable post-pandemic recovery would be contingent on simplifying procedures, implementing technology-based solutions, and investing in infrastructure that ensures equitable access to all countries to global markets. Post the global pandemic, healthcare cooperation has emerged as an important area. Taking that into cognizance, the next ministerial session brought together health ministers and was led by Honorable Health Minister of India, Shri Mansukh Mandavia. The participants of the session emphasized the need to adopt an inclusive approach to global health security. They discussed extensive ways and means to develop digital public goods in healthcare, promote traditional medicine, and build public capacity through developing regional networks and knowledge sharing. Ministers were particularly appreciative of India's Vaccine Maitri initiative during the COVID pandemic as a substantive reflection of the South-South cooperation. The seventh ministerial session was led by Honorable Minister of Education, Government of India, Shri Dharmendra Pradhan. He was joined by education ministers of 15 countries in the Global South. The session focused on human resource development, brought forth ideas to transform developing countries into knowledge-based societies that can create future-ready workforces. Ministers spoke about the need to share best practices in vocational training, capacity building, and use of technology to provide equity and equality in education. India shared its national education policy built on the foundational pillars of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. The last ministerial session was a unique one, focused on discussions to provide suggestions for India's G20 presidency. The session, led by External Affairs Minister Shri S. Jaishankar, saw enthusiastic participation from ministerial representatives of 15 countries. The session was vital in sharing India's key priorities for its G20 presidency. Speaking at the session, External Affairs Minister assured that India would work to ensure that the valuable inputs generated from partner countries during the course of this summit receive due cognizance globally, including in G20 deliberations in India. The summit drew to a close on January 13th with the concluding leaders session led by Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi. The concluding session brought together heads of government from 7 countries who appreciated and congratulated India in hosting the summit at a crucial juncture. They expressed hope that the summit would serve as a catalyst for building a prosperous and inclusive future for the world that takes into account the needs of the Global South. In his remarks at the session, Prime Minister expressed his views on the importance of the summit and announced a number of new initiatives. We would like for each one of you to listen to this message directly in the words of Honorable Prime Minister Modi. We will now be playing a video of his remarks at the concluding leaders session.
Excellencies, Namaskar. I welcome you to the Voice of Global South Summit. Over the past 2 days, This summit has seen the participation of more than 120 developing countries, the largest ever virtual gathering of Global South. I am privileged to have your company in this concluding session. Excellencies, the last 3 years have been difficult, especially for us, developing nations. The challenges of the COVID pandemic, rising prices of fuel, fertilizer, and food grains, and increasing geopolitical tensions have impacted our development efforts. However, the start of a new year is a time for fresh hope. So let me first extend my good wishes to all of you for a happy, healthy, peaceful, secure, and successful 2023. Excellencies, we all appreciate the principle of globalization. India's philosophy has always seen the world as one family. However, developing countries desire a globalization that does not create climate crisis or debt crisis. We want a globalization that does not lead to unequal distribution of vaccines or over concentrated global supply chains. We want a globalization that brings prosperity and well-being to humanity as a whole. In short, we want a human-centric globalization. Excellencies, we developing countries are also concerned about the increasing fragmentation of the international landscape. These geopolitical tensions distracts us from focusing on our development priorities. They cause sharp swings in international prices of food, fuel, fertilizer, and other commodities. To address this geopolitical fragmentation, we urgently need a fundamental reform of the major international organizations, including the United Nations Security Council and the Bretton Woods institutions. These reforms should focus on giving voice to the concerns of the developing world and reflect the realities of the 21st century. India's G20 presidency will attempt to voice the views of Global South on these important issues. Excellencies, in these development partnerships, India's approach has been consultative, outcome-oriented, demand-driven, people-centric, and respectful of the sovereignty of partner countries. I firmly believe that countries of Global South have a lot to learn from each other's development experiences. I am happy to announce that India will establish a Global South Center of Excellence. This institution will undertake research on development solutions or best practices of any of our countries, which can be scaled and implemented in other members of the Global South. As an example, the digital public goods developed by India in fields like electronic payments, health, education, or e-governance can be useful for many other developing countries. India has also made great strides in areas like space technology and nuclear energy. We will launch a Global South Science and Technology Initiative to share our experience, to share our expertise with other developing nations. During the COVID pandemic, India's Vaccine Maitri initiative supplied made in India vaccines to over 100 nations. I would now like to announce a new Arogya Maitri project. Under this project, India will provide essential medical supplies to any developing country affected by natural disasters or humanitarian crises. Excellencies, for synergizing our diplomatic voice, I propose a Global South Young Diplomats Forum to connect youthful officers to our foreign ministries. India will also institute Global South scholarships for students from developing countries to pursue higher education in India. Excellencies, the theme of today's session is inspired by the ancient wisdom of India. A prayer from the Rig Veda, the oldest text known to humanity, says, Sangachhadvam Samvadadvam Samvo Manasi Janatam, which means let us come together, speak together, and may our minds be in harmony. Or in other words, unity of voice, unity of purpose. Thank you.
जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी तकिट तगदिमि जनु तकिट तग जनु तजनु दिमि तकिट तगतां तदि तदों तदिगिणतं जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी तकिट तगदिमि जनु तकिट तग जनु तजनु दिमि तकिट तगतां तां तदिति तदों तदिगिणतं जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी तकिट तगदिमि जनु तकिट तग जनु तजनु दिमि तकिट तगतां तां तदिति तदों तदिगिणतं जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी धलं कुतकधिकु तत्तधिङ्गिणतुतां धिक्तं तद्धिक्तं तत्तद्धिक्तं तत्कृतदृकृतं तरितधनतत्कृतदृकृतं तङ्कृतदृकृतं जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी तकिट तगदिमि जनु तकिट तग जनु तजनु दिमि तकिट तगतां तदिक्तदो तदिगिणतं जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी सा सरि नि सा परि म प मरि मरि सरि सा नि सरि म सा रि म परि म प म प नि स परि परि सरि नि सरि म नि स मरि मरि स नि प म प नि स नि सा नि स नि प मरि स नि म नि स सा नि म प नि स नि मरि स नि मरि स नि प मरि म प नि स जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी तकिट तगदिमि जनु तकिट तग जनु तजनु दिमि तकिट तगतां तदिक्तदो तदिगिणतं जं तग जनु ततां तकिटदी तां तकिटदी दीं तकिटतं तग जनु तो तग तजं तजनु तदीं तग जनु तगदां तां तकिटदी दीं तकिटतं तग जनु तो तग तजं तजनु तदीं तग जनु तगदां तां तकिटदी दीं तकिटतं तग जनु तां तज्जं दीं तज्जं तुं तज्जं दं तज्जं कृतदृकृतं तत्कृतदृकृतं चित्तकृतदृकृतं तां तकिटदी दीं तकिटतं तग जनु तो तग तज्जं तज्जनु तदीं तग जनु तगदां तां तकिटदी दीं तकिटतं तग जनु तो सा मग सा नि ध म नि सा नि ध म ग स ग सा नि ध नि स ग म ग म ग ध नि ध सा नि ध ग स नि ध म ग म ध नि स ग म ग सा म ग स नि स ग स नि ग सा नि ध नि स नि ध सा नि ध म ग स नि ध ग सा नि ध म सा नि ध म ग ध तां तकिटदी दीं तकिटतं तग जनु तो तग तजं तजनु तदीं तग जनु तगदां तां तकिटदी दीं तकिटतं तग जनु तो तग जनु तो तग जनु तो
Thank you for the delightful performance. For our next and last performance of the day, please put your hands together for Miss Atsuko Maeda, who will perform the elegantly styled Kathak dance form. The composition, titled Gati, is choreographed by Sanjukta Sinha. Thank you for the beautiful performance. That brings us to the end of the events inside the auditorium. On behalf of Embassy of India, I once again thank you for your participation today and hope for your continued engagement. The cocktail reception is arranged in the foyer of the embassy. I request everyone to please step outside and enjoy the Indian food and drinks prepared for you. Thank you.